Hello, White Sox fans, and welcome to another edition of the FutureSox podcast. My name is Ian Eskridge. Joining me tonight is James Fox. How are you, James?
I'm good, man. What's going on?
Oh, not a whole lot. So tonight is a special edition of the Future Sox podcast. As you know, we are about 2 months out from the international free agent signing period, and it's ranking season at most publications. And also, we've got pitchers and catchers reporting here soon. So we got one of the experts in the field to come and join us tonight, Ben Badler from Baseball America. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. So we've been looking at the 2025 international free agent class, and who better to tell us about guys that the White Sox signed? Alejandro Cruz and Orlando Patino that we snagged from the Dodgers. What can you tell us about the 2025 draft class or free agent class?
Yeah, so this class obviously was, lined up years, I'm sure, in advance of when, uh, their new international director, David Keller, came in. So, I mean, obviously, Alejandro Cruz is one of the main kind of holdovers, I guess, if you want to call it that. Yeah, he's an interesting guy, third baseman. Usually I think you think of like a third baseman signing from Latin America. He's probably some like bigger, heavy set kid. No, I mean he's a pretty lean, athletic frame. I think for a young third baseman. He's probably like a year older than most of the guys in this signing class, just coming from Cuba, waiting until now to sign. So he has a lot of experience in uh, international tournaments. It's not like a huge power bat again, like you'd think of like a typical young third base prospect signing out of Latin America, and then I guess sort of TBD on the pure hitting ability. There were scouts who liked him the most, thought he was a pretty good hitter for his age. I don't know how much of that was also just seeing him and kind of comparing him mentally to hitters who were a year younger than him. Other scouts had more skepticism and reservations about the hitting ability. So it's tough to evaluate these guys in this context, and so I think we'll probably know a lot more about like whether this is a real prospect once the DSL season gets going. But then Patino was a guy who was going to sign with the Dodgers, and the White Sox were just in a spot where whether it was the Dodgers, Padres, Blue Jays, all these teams are sort of circling around trying to say, hey, like, are we going to be able to sign these guys? Like, are these teams going to be able to sign these players that they have committed? And Patino is one of a handful of players that the Dodgers ended up losing because the Dodgers told their players just like, same thing as the Padres. Hey, like, we still want to sign you. If we don't sign Sasaki or whatever exactly they were telling them, they're like, hey, we still want to sign you, but like just letting you know, like we can't guarantee anything on the 15th. So when that happened, the agent for Patino, same with some other players who signed elsewhere, said, all right, well then we don't really have a deal if I don't know if we're definitely going to sign. So let's see what else is out there, and he ended up signing for more money with the White Sox. So worked out for the White Sox, worked out for the player. Dodgers, I'm sure, are pretty happy with how things ended up anyway. So, but yeah, I mean, Patino's an interesting guy. He's, just like I think, power is the main tool with him, right? You look at him and he's this big, like physically mature for his age slugger. It's like a young, just like body type wise. I'm trying to think of like Yasiel Puig. I mean, he's obviously not like a grown man. Like Puig is like not that strength right now, but that sort of mold where it's like, all right, physical, like Avisal Garcia, right? Like that type of frame and power. Um, Again, sort of to be determined on the bat. I think it'll probably end up being power over hit with him, but you can definitely see what's to like in terms of the power and the power upside with him.
And so Keller, when he talked to the media, kind of talked a lot about Yobel Rodriguez out of Cuba, just because I think that was his actual signing. Like I think they signed him in December. You would know that better than me, but just your thoughts on him and like maybe some of the other pitchers they got, and then just in general, like your thoughts on teams that try to sign a bunch of pitching in the international class, like specifically because of like how cheap it is usually.
Yeah. Rodriguez, I think, is an interesting arm just because he's already up to 93 miles an hour, which is pretty good for that age. But then you look at his body. I mean, it's 6'2", pretty lean, athletic, throws strikes. Like there's feel for a change up there. So definitely components to like. And yeah, I mean, teams like you look at the top bonus list every year, and it's unless there's somebody, usually it's like an older Cuban pitcher or something. And this year was a little bit different because there was one Dominican pitcher who signed for 1.8 million later in the process with the Braves, Rowdy Reyes. But like usually the top 50 bonuses, there might be one pitcher on the list, right? Because teams know, hey, like we're not so great even in the draft when it comes to picking 18-year-old high school pitchers who we see a lot and are 2 years older than these guys who we're signing from Latin America. So they know there's just so much risk inherent involved in signing 16-year-old pitching, especially when you're actually trying to make these decisions when they're even younger than that a lot of times. So, but there are some teams, I think like the Rockies, the Cardinals, you saw the Marlins do it this year, that are more willing than most to spend even mid to upper six-figure bonuses on a pitcher. So I think there's value to doing that, especially now that the bonus pools have gotten so big. I mean, 6 million, 7 million plus for each team. Where okay, if you want to spend $700,000 on a pitcher you love, like that's not that big of a chunk of your bonus pool. But at the same time, I mean, pitchers can just pop from all over at all different price points at all ages. I mean, you just look at the Houston Astros playoff rotation of guys they're signing for 10K, 30K, 40K at 17 years old, 19 years old, 20. Like pitchers can change so fast where it's there's so many different arms that sort of are interesting guys who are 87, 91, varying degrees of feel for a breaking ball or strikes, and then all of a sudden 3 months later one of them's 91, 95, and it's like, oh, all right, well that's a different guy now. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan of if there's a pitcher you like that you're really excited about, yeah, be willing more than most to pay up a little bit more, but still you can find a lot in volume, especially if you have good scouts who are out there seeing a lot of players and finding good value.
Well, speaking of David Keller, the White Sox managed to grab him from the Mets to take over for Marco Patti. What do you know about David Keller and some of the changes that the White Sox are undergoing under Chris Getz?
Yeah, I hear a lot of good things about him. It's tough, right? Because you don't know exactly. Like looking at, you can say, "Oh, like look at what the Mets have done," but it's tough when you're, if he were the international director there, that would be one thing to, just to look at their signings and see what they've done. But obviously, you don't have all the influence when you're not the boss in the room. It does sound like, from what I've heard, he was pretty an important part of the signing of Elian Pena in terms of evaluating him. He was, the guy that the Mets just signed from shortstop from the Dominican Republic, who they gave $5 million to, which, if you're giving a guy $5 million out of your $6 million bonus pool, like that's even, you're probably getting sign offs above the international director, probably up to the GM and that such level. But yeah, I've heard a lot of good things on him, and just from other scouts. He's been involved in international scouting and domestic scouting, pro scouting for them as well. So yeah, I imagine there's going to be a lot of changes coming to the White Sox in a much different way of probably just different processes, and I'm sure different things that they're targeting and evaluate. Like certainly the White Sox have signed a ton of Cuban players over the years, and smashing success with like a Luis Robert. But when you get outside the spending $26 million bonus or whatever it was for him. And you look around at some of the other players they've signed that haven't panned out. Like I think you'll see a much different look to more, a lot more like heavy on like the Dominican and Venezuelan signings. I would imagine.
Yeah, so like one of those changes Chris Getz has talked about, they're building like a new facility supposedly that should be ready sometime in 2026 in the Dominican Republic. Just, like, how much can a new facility in the DR just like improve their international success in general? And then do most of the successful teams, you think at this point, have 2 DSL teams?
Yeah, so it's great to have a new facility both for scouting and for player development. Just the more updated facilities you have, like people talk about, oh, like in terms of like selling players on like wanting to come here. I think that's like a very small part of it. Like at the end of the day, players are going to go whoever the biggest offer is. But for for your player development staff, I mean, the DSL, like your Dominican prospects, are part of your farm systems. Like it's important to have good facilities in place, good technology in place, good weight room, everything else that goes on behind the scenes there. You want your scouts to be excited to come to your academy, like where the White Sox are now. Same as a handful of other teams right now. It's more of a bare bones type facility, functional at best. Talking to some other, not the White Sox specifically, but other clubs where they, I describe it as a functional, maybe more of a dysfunctional facility at times. Just different things not working that need to be that should be working consistently. So it's good, but at the end of the day, like it's just a building, right? Like you need to sign good players. The Rangers had a really, I think, a really strong international program for a while, and they probably had one of the worst facilities in the DR. So, but I think one of the things you hit on, is James, is having a bigger facility gives you an option to have or more leeway to have 2 Dominican Summer League teams, right? There are teams that have smaller, older academies in the DR right now that want to have 2 DSL teams, but they just physically do not have the space at their academy to house that many players. So if you have a new academy that can hold, I think it's like 35 player roster per team. So if you can hold, 70 players there, even better. Cause I think, yeah, it's such a no brainer to me. And I think to a lot of people to have 2 DSL teams, because, okay, you have to do some things a little bit different strategically if you have 2 teams versus 1 team. But just for like the pitchers alone, it's like, okay, so we can have another, on a 35-man roster, 20-ish arms to just take a chance on guys for $10,000, smaller bonuses, and just give them to your development staff, see what clicks. There's value to moving guys around in different positions, but you sign 2 really good shortstops you're excited about. You don't have to have them splitting reps between shortstop and second base, or you probably have guys too who you sign for mid-range bonuses who you like and want to get them playing time too. So it's just such an obvious advantage to have more players to take a chance on with 2 DSL teams.
Well, with getting the new facility, obviously that's going to be at least it's not going to necessarily attract players, but at least it's a feather in the cap that they can say, hey, we've got really nice facilities here. And obviously you want to provide the staff that's going to help develop these guys. What else do you think the White Sox can do in the international market to attract players and get better at the international market in general?
Yeah, I think just hiring out more staff. I don't know like the exact numbers, and I'm sure when a new director comes in, he's going to want to bring in his own people. But just having more people on the ground, like having a very thorough process, I think is important. And just having good scouts and having more scouts, I think is just such an advantage. I mean, it's not like college baseball, like you're evaluating college players for the draft, where I think it's important to have a lot of scouts domestically too, but okay, like there's a lot you can do to analyze players in different ways in college baseball, in particular in the draft. You can't do that in Latin America. Like, you have to physically go out there, be at the field, and find and identify, especially in international free agency, as long as until there's a draft that may come along. But um, the big part of competition is trying to beat other teams to the punch, and also just having more scouts on the ground to get, I would say I would use the word lucky to a certain extent in terms of identifying players who are, eligible players, eligible pitchers. You just happen to be at the right place at the right time when, you go out to see a hitter, and the pitcher who he's facing is, oh, actually, that guy is pretty interesting. Maybe we want to bring him into our academy for another look, or maybe we just want to sign him right here. So yeah, just being very thorough in your scouting process and having a lot of really good scouts on the ground is, I don't think I'm saying anything revolutionary here, but has definitely has a major impact.
So for next January, like 2026, you think even at that point, like the bulk of the names that come out are still going to be names that were acquired from the previous, like Marco Patti staff, most likely? Or is there like an opportunity for Keller now in this market, like to go out and just, get guys that might have agreements with other teams, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's the wild thing is, right, is not just next year, but even 2027, you look around and, okay, like, hey, like I just got the job. Let's go out and, sign the best players for, I mean, obviously for 25, like, that's not going to happen. 26, most of them have agreements in place. It's the same for 27 too, right? And those players are, it sounds crazy to say, oh, the top player for 2027, right? Or even 2028, there are players with agreements. And those players are so young, right? Like, what do we know about players when they're 13 or 14 years old? There's only so many guys running around who look like, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. when they were 14 uh, years old. So, yeah, it's tough because you probably won't see the total fruits of like a being able to start from like a blank slate of a signing class to come in for a few more years, which, then you think about it's like, okay, in 2028, those guys are just going to be in the DSL. By the time these guys get to low A, you're talking about 2030. Like, I don't know where I'm going to be in 2030, but at the same time, yeah, like there are going to be guys who pop up. I don't even want to call it like later on in the process, but later on than like the super early deals for 2026, 2027 as well, that I'm sure, they'll probably have a lot more uncommitted money to be able to attack those classes relative to most teams if somebody else pops up later, or some other, something else happens. So but yeah, it's a very weird thing. Like in the draft, you're not like, oh, I'm the new scouting director, like this is my first draft, oh, but I have to wait for like the next 2 or 3 classes, like all the top players are gone. Like it's just such a unusual set of circumstances internationally.
Well, the White Sox have had pretty mixed results here in the last couple of years, and they didn't move over a ton of guys from the DSL to the ACL. But Jurdrick Profar, Javier Mogollon's been there for a year. Abraham Nunez has been there. What can you tell us about them?
Probably the quickest way to sum it up would be that we have our White Sox top 30 out, and none of those guys are in our top 30 right now. Mogollon is, or had been, more interesting to me. Like you'll get the slash line, obviously it was good this year, but this, for a little guy, he can hit the ball hard. Like it's pretty jarring to see the way that the ball comes off his bat, and you can see it in the power numbers he put up. But 69 strikeouts and 180 plate appearances this year. Just the swing and miss to his game, especially for a little guy, where the bat, or a combination of bat and power, has to be his calling card. That was pretty discouraging to me, especially as somebody who was really, really excited about Javier Magallon. But so, not writing him off by any means, but he's definitely going to have to cut down on the swing and miss that he showed the last year.
And then, I mean, their top signing was Eduardo Herrera, and it's very typical, like Marco Patti type signing, just with, the scouting reports that were written up by you and other people that do things similar to you. How, concerning or discouraging was his season in the DSL last year? He's staying there, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, he's, you're signing him, and he had some experience at catcher, but it just, especially seeing him in person, it's like, okay, I can see why they didn't want him to catch. Like, he's a big physical guy. And yeah, you're signing him because of the offense, or that's what they were banking on. And then, kind of the slash line this year in the DSL kind of says that it wasn't a whole lot to be excited about. So don't want to write off a player after just one bad season, but certainly trending the wrong way.
What would you think about the benefits and the negatives to if Major League Baseball was to move to an international draft in 2027?
Yeah, the benefits would be, I mean, the main benefit would be it would slow down this insanity, in my opinion, of all of these super early agreements, right? Like, I remember the first time I think I heard of a player doing a deal with a team. This is when they used to sign on July 2nd, more than a little more than a year in advance of his July 2nd when he could sign. Was I think it was 2015, if I remember correctly. So this was 10 years ago. And at that time it was like, whoa, this is getting a year in advance. This is wild. And now it's okay, we're talking players are routinely reaching agreements to sign when they're 13, 14 years old. So I think it would be in the players' best interest to have things slow down. He talked to a lot of the trainers too, and a lot of them want things to slow down too. They're still split on terms of whether they want to draft or not, but they don't want to they have players in their program now from the time, if teams are trying to sign players when they're 13 years old, well, now you have to get a player in your program when he's 12 years old, 11 years old, just to get them ready to sign when they're 16 or 17. And it's not like an agent in the States who, people want to criticize the trainers for taking, these big percentages of bonuses, but at the same time, they provide a lot more value and a lot more services. Like, they're actually, their housing and feeding and all the equipment, everything, they're training, they're actually developing these players. It's a lot different than just an agent in the States doing contract negotiation, and they're providing other services as well in the States. But it's pretty expensive to do all of that for especially if you have a whole academy full of players and trying to pay all those expenses for 5-6 years. So a lot of them are saying, hey, we don't, this is not good for us either to have these teams and us reaching these agreements super early. And then the scouts too are saying, hey, again, generally speaking, I don't think people want their jobs and their careers to depend on their ability to predict the future of 13-year-old baseball players. It's hard enough at 16, 17. Look at the track record. I think teams do some pretty good work in scouting and evaluating and projecting the very top end, especially position players, but it's still not great. It's not any better when you're looking, 13, 14 years old. So it would slow everything down. That would be a benefit. The biggest drawback is just the lack of freedom, right? I think it's great that players have the freedom to choose where they're going to sign. Now, it's within a system where there's a cap on what they can sign for. That's obviously not great for them, but the ability to say, okay, I have 30 teams that I can choose from if they want to sign me. And the same way the teams have that freedom where they can go out and say, hey, like if we beat our competition to a player, we can sign that player. Or even if MLB put in like a rule that was like, or enforced rules that said, hey, like no early agreements, but we're going to keep international free agency, then if a team wants to say, hey, we want to put all of our bonus pool money this year into signing Julio Rodriguez or into signing whoever, Kevin Maitan, like who doesn't work out or something like that. Well, hey, you have the ability to do that. You have the ability to spread out your bonus pool money. You have the ability to take different strategies. It's not just, hey, the Washington Nationals were the worst team in baseball, and now they get the number 1 overall pick in the draft, or I would see. We'll see how they would structure it, right? Like obviously, there's a lottery in place in the draft right now, and in the domestic draft. So I would be really against having one team get the number 1 overall pick in both the draft in the States and internationally. I don't think that will be good, but just in terms of being able to compete for players, it's like, okay, well, we pick at 10, so we can pick our guy at 10, then we wait around another 30 or so picks to pick another guy. No, like international free agency, one of the beautiful things about it is teams can go out and they have the freedom to go out and sign the players and compete with each other instead of having these handcuffs on them that the draft puts in place.
I mean, when it was proposed during the last CBA, it did seem like the money at the top for guys would be similar. Why do you think just that was just like a no-go at that point? Is it short-sightedness from veteran players who it doesn't affect? Was it just not time for it? I just, because I remember thinking like, hey, this actually doesn't sound too bad. And then obviously like it didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways you can structure. I think like reflexively, people think, oh, it's a draft, it's going to be worse for players. There are ways you can structure a draft to make it, make the economics of it work just as well for the players under a draft that there is under international free agency. I wouldn't certainly blindly trust MLB to set it up that way. But I think just the reason it didn't happen is that, and I agree, I thought it was going to happen because it just seems like, okay, especially once think back to the previous CBA when, the White Sox could blow past their bonus pool and give Luis Robert all that money, and a whole bunch of other teams are blowing past their bonus pool and just paying, essentially double the bonuses in tax money. I couldn't believe that the union agreed to a hard cap. So, okay, the bonuses are already hard capped. It's a huge win for the owners already. What does the Players Association care at that point if the signing system is free agency under a hard cap or a draft under a hard cap? But, one of the big things is that what does the union care about international or domestic, frankly, for that matter, amateur players anyway? Because these players are not in the union. Obviously, the union has expanded now to include more than just the 40-man roster players, but especially at that time, the union is made up of 40-man roster players. They're looking out for the interest of players who are in their union, but yet they are able to negotiate for, negotiate these signing systems for both, again, domestic and international amateur players. So I think they realize, hey, this is a big thing that MLB still really wants. They want this international draft. So this is a big bargaining chip for us to get something big from MLB in return. And MLB, I thought they would just say, yeah, you know what? We finally got this here. Like, we've been pushing for an international draft for literally 30 years. I mean, you can go back in Baseball American, 1996, or I think it was, where you have Sandy Alderson working at the commissioner's office talking about how an international draft is inevitable. Literally 30 years ago, and it still hasn't happened. So I thought MLB would just say, all right, we'll give the union something bigger than maybe we're comfortable with. That we would typically be comfortable with, just to get this headache out of here, and we'll just go to a draft. But they didn't really budge at all.
Yeah, it was weird.
So it's this weird, because they know the same thing, right? They know the union doesn't really care all that much about an international draft, and so both these sides are sort of like doing this dance of, this is so important to us. We're so against the draft, but the MLB, like the owners, kind of know that they don't really mean it. But then both sides kind of sunk their feet into the sand. I don't know if that's the right turn of phrase there, but they both dug their heels in, and they didn't get a draft. So and I thought it was going to happen, and it didn't. So I think it still seems like a likely outcome, but to me, if the owners really want this to happen, just give up a little bit more than you're typically comfortable doing. Maybe that's like bad negotiating advice. I don't know, but it just seems like it's been such a headache for them for so long, and something they've wanted for so long, to just kind of suck it up and give something bigger to the union.
Well, I think they tried to tie it to like the qualifying offer system somehow, right? Like they were going to do an international draft, and then you weren't going to have to give up picks to sign free agents anymore. And then the whole thing just like never happened.
Right. And I think the union is like, well, that doesn't affect that many of us each year.
Yeah.
Right. So we still want to hold out for something bigger in their
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. I mean, at least they got the salary floor up for, the younger guys. So, I mean, they did get some things sorted out, but 2027 is going to be that collective bargaining is going to be a tough one. So system ranking times, White Sox system has gotten quite a bit better in the rankings. We'd like to think that it has a lot to do with the drafting, but also there have been some pretty big trades that have brought some big pieces to the White Sox system. Who are some of your favorites in the system overall, and what do you think about the system overall as well?
Yeah, I think it's a strong farm system, especially the top 6-7 players. I think we have I don't know, a whole bunch of them in our top 100. And I mean, my favorite is, I'm not going to surprise anybody here, but I love Noah Schultz. I think he is the best left-handed pitching prospect in baseball. Like I think he's right up there in the conversation with Jackson Jobe for the best, depending how you classify it, Roki Sasaki, but just for the best pitching prospect overall in the game right now. I mean, he's 6'9", or did I hear right? He grew now to 6'10", or I mean, whatever.
He is 6'10". Yeah, he's. I guess he was 6'9" and 7/8. So they just kind of rounded up.
Yeah, that's what he needed just to get even bigger and scarier. But I mean, what always stood out to me watching him and going back to when he was in high school was just how well coordinated he was. Like how you usually see those guys and who are that. I mean, not that there's that many guys who are that big, but just, when you get to guys who are like 6'6", 6'7" plus, and it's just like long arms and legs flying everywhere, and usually the ball is going everywhere. And I mean, he always threw a lot of strikes. He could always spin a really good slider. And now he's just added even more power to his fastball. The slider is filthy, like just the whole repertoire across the board to go with the strikes. Like some people like Andrew Painter more than him. And I'm like, I like Andrew Painter. He's a good prospect, obviously, with the Phillies, but Andrew Painter's missed a lot of time with injuries. And I get Noah Schultz, like to see him pitch a little bit deeper into games. I get that, but a guy who hasn't had any major operations on him, dominating the way that he has, throwing strikes the way that he can. I mean, I think he has a chance to be like a true number one starter. So you pair him with Hagen Smith. There's obviously like no better like duo of left-handed pitching prospects in baseball. I mean, he looked when he's on, like he looks like Carlos Rodon, like the good version of Carlos Rodon, just that big fastball from the left side with a filthy slider. I mean, he's going to have to tighten some things with the command, but again, it's not like he's all over the place or anything like that. It's just something he's going to have to get a little bit tighter with, because the fastball slider combination is pretty electric.
And then before we just let you go here, so I know that at Baseball America as a whole, you guys didn't rank Edgar Caro. I listened to the show with you and Carlos, where you guys, I think, both had him on your individual 100s. Just, what do you think about just like the growth that he's made, and then just having two catchers that good in general, like as two of your like top prospects?
Yeah, I mean, odds are like, one of he or Kyle Teal probably won't work out. Just like that's you look back on. I love prospects, but I also think it's important to look back at like our 2015 or 16 or whatever. Like go back through previous prospect lists and be like, oh, like they thought this guy was going to be like. There's a lot of misses still, right? Like guys don't all work out, so it's good to have two guys like that who are two of the best catching prospects in baseball. I mean, yeah, Caro's just like a really, really solid, well-rounded catcher. Like I think I like the way he hits. He can put the bat to the ball, knows the strike zone. He's gonna stick behind the plate. I think that's pretty clear at this point. So having him and Teal, like I don't know exactly how they're gonna sort out the the playing time with those guys, but so they'll both have plenty of opportunities, I'm sure, to to get reps and at the major league level, hopefully this year. Because I'm a for me, I agree. I think Edgar Caro's a top 100 guy for me.
We were very happy to hear that. Thanks for coming on tonight, Ben. We really appreciate it. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you?
Yeah, everything up at baseballamerica.com. I mean, our site runs on our subscribers, so we try to keep everything, especially now that the season is updated. We put a lot of emphasis on keeping everything continually updated. Our in season rankings with our top 100 and our top 30 prospect rankings. We update those pretty consistently during the season just to try to stay up to date and stay consistent. I mean, so much can happen and change pretty quickly as we get new information on these guys. So we're not obviously just like turning out rankings for the sake of rankings. It's like, hey, we want to add more value for our subscribers and show like, hey, this is actually, this preseason list is where we thought guys were, and we're continually iterating and updating everything in addition to all the other content that we have on our site and, every other social media channel, Twitter, Instagram, wherever. You can type my name and I think it's a unique name, so it shouldn't be hard to find.
All right. Well, thank you so much. You have been watching or listening to the FutureSox podcast. If you are listening to this in podcast form, know that you can find us every Sunday night at 8 p.m. on YouTube and the Purple app. My name is Ian Eskridge at Daily White Sox. He's James Fox at James Fox 917. We appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.